But overall, what it does is there were a lot of questions, and instead of having answers, you added more questions to the to the deal.
We're far off the mark. We're far off the mark. If Christian isn't having a 10 out of 10 performance or a 9 out of 10 performance, if Weston, if Tyler, if all those are core players aren't at their very, very best, then I think there's a question to be had about the depth of this squad, that we don't have enough players that can step up and compete against the Canadian side or against a Panamanian side to get a result.
And these two games that we've lost, you know, they're on home soil. And you look to the World Cup where the game's going to be played. They're going to play two of the games in the group stage are going to be played in the stadium. And it's not good to think about the last two times you played here, you took 2 L's.
I do think you'd have a different turnout in terms of U.S. fans at the World Cup. Do you expect that too?
For sure.
Sorry, I agree that definitely is a talking point of yes. I'm concerned. I don't like seeing this. I don't like coming into a stadium, and I'm hoping that Mexican fans are arriving early for their game so that there's more fans in attendance.
Oh, they are.
But nonetheless, you're on the pitch, right? If you're worried and your motivation has to come from the outside, then that's a concern in itself. And I'm not saying that that's what the players felt or that's what the players have, you know, expressed. But what happens between the white lines is what the players can't control. And in 2 consecutive games, to Clint's point, in a stadium that we're going to be playing in during the World Cup, it just collectively, from the players, from the managerial standpoint, it hasn't been to the standard that we expect from this group of players.
Theirry, just give us a neutral perspective on this game.
Not so much the game, is the 2 games and what's been happening as a unit. Fans, you guys, the team, you know, a bit of a disappointment when I see that like you don't have that cohesion. So it's very difficult when the crowd is divided from the team and the ex-players. There's something that I felt from you guys when you were talking that you can't relate to the team, and we mentioned it so many times. You struggle at the end of the game to even talk about it because it hurts, and obviously it's not an easy one. But for me, it was about how they were going to play, and I know you wanted to see a win on this side. I wanted to see how they were going to behave. You can lose against Canada, like we said before. They're one of the best teams in this part of the world, and not little Canada. They have a good team, so you can lose against Canada. What I saw against Panama wasn't what you're supposed to see. You can understand. Look, I think the changes happen with Pulisic leaving, McKennie leaving, Tyler Adams leaving. Maybe if they stay, they come back. Who knows? But overall, what it does is there were a lot of questions, and instead of having answers, you added more questions to the deal, and so it is very difficult. I see it from afar. I'm worried for the U.S. national team when it's going to come to the World Cup. Is the stadium going to be full? Yeah, I think the stadium is going to be full. People are going to turn up, but ultimately, you know, it's on you to make sure that they can vibrate with you. And I didn't see that, unfortunately, for them. And hopefully they can work and do better. But do better against who? Competitive games, Gold Cup. You're going to miss players. Friendly games, not an easy one.
Does anybody here feel like they have any of the answers of what needs to change?
Well, I think first and foremost, Pochettino has to figure out what his best 11 looks like and what formation he wants to play in. Maybe that's determined based on the players he has available to him, but I didn't feel, and maybe this is a question you're going to ask as well about his position, Christian's position.
Yes,
it's interesting to hear him say that he likes playing the 10 and that it just was a matter of him not getting enough touches on the ball. My preference is I like him wide. I like him wide. I like him having the freedom to come inside, to pick his moments when he comes centrally. But in the last couple of games that we saw, the midfield was relatively congested. When he gets the ball there and he's having to go against numerous players centrally, it's a lot more bodies there. And I like him better in the wide area. But listen, if he's going to play centrally, fine. But they have to figure out a way to get him not just more touches on the ball, but touches on the ball in dangerous areas so where he can really impact the attack.
Or even rotating positions, at times being the withdrawn striker, at times being wide, like moving throughout the game to find the game. Because sometimes, depending on what the opposition is giving you, you have to adjust a little bit. Just having, you know, a little bit of that, you know, being able to try different things in different positions and try to open things up. At the end of the day, he looks very frustrated. He looks like almost defeated in not knowing how to figure this out.
I guess in terms of him talking about building momentum this summer, obviously the Gold Cup has just become absolutely enormous. It was always going to be important in the summer leading into a World Cup, but now there's even more pressure on that tournament at a time where you're not going to have your best team.
Yeah, I mean, you look about the failures that have happened. They've been back-to-back. Copa America not getting out of the group. I know we keep saying the same thing over and over, but it builds, and the fan base feel it. You know what I'm saying? So not doing well in the CONCACAF Nations League. I mean, even though we won 3 out of 4, these are 2 back-to-back failures as we're building towards the World Cup on home soil. Can you imagine if this team doesn't win Gold Cup or get to the final, and then if they don't get out of the group stage, you go from talking about a generation you thought was going to be one of the best, but to one in recent times that's been the worst. I agree. I hope that doesn't happen.
I don't think it should always. Also, I think there's going to be more pressure building up on Pochettino because everyone says, hey, the U.S. needed a world-class coach with all this experience. Then everything's going to be solved because he's going to set them up the right way. He's going to motivate them because part of a coach is also motivating players. And not all players respond the right way, so it's knowing how do I motivate certain guys at certain times, but also getting the most out of my players, knowing what substitutes to put in. I go back to Jack McGlynn in that game on Thursday. How does that change the game? How do you build momentum in the attacking third by making a Jack McGlynn sub? And I'm not saying Jack McGlynn's a bad player, but I'm saying what he offers you. He's not a player to play between the lines. He's not a player to dribble at you, to pull people out of position. So Pochettino is going to have more pressure on him in the summer to figure out who are the guys I can rely on. For the guys who are available, because you got to start playing for positions now, not tomorrow, now. So I think that's a big part of it.
In terms of the pressure building on Pochettino also has to be looking at this performance, Thursday's performance, and thinking, I have a very tough job ahead of me.
That's the only thing, if you're a coach, that you will have maybe some answers that he wanted to have in terms of who he's going to bring on the World Cup or not. And also, like you guys don't remember, but as a coach, you see how people also interact with each other in camp to see who's going to be a problem or not a problem at the World Cup. And I don't want to mention names, but sometimes you go through difficulties in the camp. We all know that. But look, it was always going to be difficult. We're talking about international level. You do not have the time to train that team on the field. So if you're already behind the 8 ball, like we always say, how are you going to find that? And on top of everything, when you play, you don't perform. That's a tough one. The level of expectation of the US team in this part of the world is huge. People can understand that maybe at the World Cup you might not, or you will maybe go far or not, and they can understand that you might lose against some good teams. But they won't understand that one. And having to build a team through that, the coach before had to do it, and it was always what they're not doing, what they didn't do yet, and this team is not even doing. So it's a tough one. He has to build a team. When you look at some players coming in, you mentioned McGlynn, but I mean, it's not only that. There's so many things that happen that you need to have in order to perform well. Like, it is tough. What's the vision? I'm not in the camp to know what's the vision, but what's the vision? What are you going to, maybe as a team in his head that we don't know about,
what about sitting back, a team that sits back like Panama, and you play 2 players like a Testament and Adams that
it is different. Like the thing that I explained at the beginning of the show, when you play a 3-2-2-3-1, or however you want to call it, 3-box-3 or whatever, you find yourself in a situation where if you ask the center back on the left to drive, right? If you ask the center back to drive, one of the midfielders needs to take his position. That's when it's useful to have 2. But if that guy doesn't drive and the 2 don't move nowhere, what's the point to have 5 behind the ball against 1 striker?
Right.
Yeah, it's not only, I go even further. You were talking about having 2 holding midfielders. But technically, they had 5 men behind the ball against 1 striker of Panama the other day. And 5 has to battle that back 5 and 4. How do you open them up? Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
So if you play that 3-box-3, the 2 are good, if the center back drives, because you played in that position, you take the position of the center back, the other one stands in front of it. So you form that 3-1. Center back went to drive to make sure that you can make someone jump, to have that little joy of having a 3v2 on the side or left or on the right. It depends wherever you want to go. But I don't know what's the plan.